Hello, everybody. So, with Deadman mode wrapping up and, of course, running for the last few weeks, the subject of PvP in old school has been on everyone's minds, and of course, whenever that happens, it leads to endless arguments. One side who just wants people to kill, and another side who feels forced to be there from factors outside their control and just hates being killed. Now, this video today isn't to say which side is better or right or wrong, and it's not to criticize the way that anyone enjoys to play the game. No, this video today is to try and explain, using not too tortured, but hopefully not too tortured of an analogy, where this feeling comes from both sides, and how I feel it's kind of the natural endpoint of the design space that we're using. So, without too much preamble, let's get into it, and if you stick with me to the end, I promise this will start to make more sense. So, imagine you're at the park, and there's lots of things there. There's slides, there's swings, there's a what do you call it, merry-go-round, but there's only one sandpit, and little Timmy comes along and he wants to play in the sandpit. But the sandpit is inside of a boxing ring. Okay? This is the only sandpit in the park. And Timmy comes up and he sees the sandpit and he says, okay, I want to play in the sand. But there's a sign outside. And the sign says, this boxing pit, this sand pit is in a boxing ring. If you go into this boxing ring, people can beat you up and they can kick your sandcastle down. And you'll just have to deal with that. But Timmy comes in and he sees that there's no other sandpit available. There's only the sandpit in the boxing ring. So he looks around and he doesn't see anyone around. He doesn't see anyone in the vicinity to kick his sandcastle down. He reads the sign. He understands the implications of the sign. But because the only sandpit is here, and because he doesn't see any danger at the minute, he decides, okay, I'm going to go in anyway, and I'm going to build my sandcastle. And he gets about 10 or 15 minutes in before Johnny turns up. And he comes into the boxing ring and he beats Timmy up and kicks his sandcastle down. Timmy is obviously upset by this. He's been putting work to the sandcastle. He just wants to build his sandcastle and now he's getting beaten up. And so he leaves and Johnny does too. And this cycle will repeat. Each day Timmy turns up, hopes to get a chance to build in the sandcastle, and Johnny always turns up to break it down. After a while, Timmy starts to get upset, and so he goes and he talks to the manager of the park. So Timmy goes over to the manager and he says, hey, why is this the only sandpit in the park located at a boxing ring? Could we perhaps have a sandpit, move the sandpit out of the boxing ring? And the manager says, no, that wouldn't be fair, because then Johnny would have no one's sandcastle to kick down. Johnny enjoys kicking down the sandcastle, and you enjoy building them. So to make you both happy, we put the sandcastle in the boxing ring. And Timmy is not very happy about that answer, but he's like, okay, so can we have two sandpits, one in the boxing ring and one outside the boxing ring? And the manager says, no, we tried that, but what happens is everyone uses the one outside the boxing ring and no one uses the one in the boxing ring. So we do it this way so that we don't have Johnny in here complaining that he's got no sandcastles to kick down. And Timmy, obviously disgruntled, is upset by that, and he has to go back to building sandcastles in the boxing ring. And so the cycle repeats again. Timmy comes to the sandpit, tries to build a sandcastle, gets interrupted, gets it kicked down. This cycle will repeat over and over again. Some days, Timmy might get really lucky, and Johnny might not turn up at all. Johnny might be on holiday. He had to go see his grandma, whatever. And so now Timmy gets unfiltered access to the sandpit for an hour straight, 2 hours. And it's great. But the problem now is that it gives him hope. Every day, Timmy turns up hoping to get that sort of feeling again, where he can have it for an hour or two, unbothered, but most of the time it won't happen because Johnny always comes back. Because this is what Johnny finds fun. Johnny enjoys kicking down sandcastles and he enjoys beating up kids whenever he can. That's what's fun for him. And the rules of the park, as clearly stated on the sign, say that that's okay. And so this happens a few times, and eventually Timmy's had enough, and he starts to yell at Johnny. He says, Johnny, why do you do this? Why do you always kick down my sandcastle? And why do you always beat me up? I don't have anything on me, there's nothing to take, and you don't get anything out of this. And Johnny says, well, one time I beat up a kid and he had like £10 in his pocket and I took that. So I'm kind of just beating up everyone and hoping that I get that again. And it's like, well, I never do that, says Timmy. I never bring £10 in my pocket. And he's like, yeah, but you might. So I need to beat up everyone to have a chance to get their money. But then Timmy's like, okay, but why do you have to beat me up? Why can't you go and fight someone in one of the other boxing rings? Because this park, by the way, has multiple boxing rings. This is the only one with a sandpit in it. But there are other boxing rings, but this is the only sandpit. And Johnny says, yeah, sometimes I go to those other boxing rings, but they're not as fun. I like this one because it lets me kick down sandcastles. And Timmy is obviously upset by that. And so what we end up with is an end scenario where both people are kind of mad at the other but neither is technically wrong. See, in Timmy's mind, Johnny is stupid because Johnny's kicking down his sandcastle and being a dick. He just wants to build a sandcastle. He doesn't want to fight. He knows what the sign says. He knows he's in a boxing ring, but this is also the only sandpit in the park. Okay, so he always comes here and he gets obviously frustrated that Johnny is here kicking his sandcastle down. And on the other hand, Johnny is upset because Timmy keeps giving him grief for doing what he thinks is the intended purpose of this area. It's a boxing ring. You know, if you've come to the boxing ring and don't expect to get punched, then you're an idiot. And kind of both of them are right. Because ultimately, why is there a sandpit in the boxing ring in the first place? That's the point I'm trying to get at here. So this is, as I'm hoping you understand from the analogy, the modern RuneScape wilderness as we have it in old school. The game as a whole is this big park, and the wilderness is this boxing ring. And inside the wilderness is the only sandpit in the park. There are multiple sandpits, but these are things that you can only acquire in the wilderness. Things like the Callisto Pear, the Void Waker, I don't know, the Malediction Ward, stuff like that. Every little thing that's in the wilderness and exclusive to the wilderness, even the achievement diary is in itself a little sandpit. Some people come to the wilderness and they just want to play in the sand because that's where the only sandpit is. And so no amount of yelling at those people and telling them, hey, don't come to the wilderness if you don't want to get beat up, is going to ever fix them because they just want to play in the sand. And unless you understand this framing and this mindset, which I believe is the natural endpoint of this game design, unless you believe the mindset of the Timmy, you'll never change what's happening here. Because what the Johnnies of the world would say is they'd say, hey, Timmy, if you're coming in the boxing ring, why don't you fight back? Why don't you get some boxing gloves and learn to fight back? And then you can, when I try and kick your sandcastle down, maybe you can beat me. And maybe Timmy could do that, but that's not really what he wants to do. You know, maybe he could learn to fight back. Maybe he would enjoy that. But many Timmys don't enjoy that. He says, I didn't come here to fight. I came here to play in the sand. I have no interest in fighting you. And this is why when people come up with solutions for this sort of thing, they often, one of the things that comes up a lot is tutorials for PvP, a PvP tutorial boss, or something like that, or a tutor. It might help. It might improve the amount of people getting into PvP, and it's probably a good thing and, can be added. But it won't solve this problem because no amount of training or tutorials or incentives, that's the other angle. One of the things that the manager will often do is he'll come in and he'll be like, okay, I'll make the sand nicer. I'll make the sand pit bigger, so that Timmy has a nicer time in the sand pit and encourages him to stay longer. It doesn't fix the problem because all that ends up happening is either as nice as you make the sand, Timmy builds his sandcastle and Johnny kicks it down. Timmy's not happy because his sandcastle was ruined. And Johnny's not happy because Timmy hates him. But maybe Johnny doesn't care about that. You will never fix this problem being, the horror of what a lot of people feel is a rather nasty gameplay loop if you don't understand this problem. And you kind of just have to come to a decision of whether you want kicking sandcastles down to be something that's in your game. I understand that some people might think that's an unfair analogy, but I'm not saying this is some sort of soapbox moral position, all right? It's a video game. Kicking sandcastles down in a video game, can be fun. Like, don't get me wrong, I play PvP games. I play Dead by Daylight. I love playing the killer in Dead by Daylight. The whole point of that game is to kill the four other people on the other team. And a huge part of the fun in killing someone in a PvP game is knowing that there's someone on the other side who's getting mad that you killed them. Okay, we just have to admit that is how it is. There's no point lying about it. Okay, it's fun. And in even older days, I used to play in Minecraft Anarchy servers where you could do whatever you wanted, and it used to be so fun to find someone's house and take all their shit and burn the house down and then see them log in and get mad in the chat. Yeah, I get it. That's really fun. But you have to make a decision in RuneScape. Is that the sort of gameplay we want? And I think we just should be honest about it. When we bait non-PKers to the wilderness by, putting sandpits in there, this is literally what's going to happen every single time. It doesn't matter how many warnings you put on the wilderness ditch, how many times you tell people, yes, the wilderness is a PvP zone. By creating the ability for non-PvPers to go there and earn rewards and do things that they can't do elsewhere, that's the important part, is that they cannot do this stuff in other areas of the game. As long as you do that, you will always create this scenario. With a very good recent example is the Bofa kit in Deadman mode. We saw endless complaints of Reddit and the other places of people just getting mad, because they want to go to dead man mode. They want to just skill to get the points they need and then get their kit and log off. They have no interest in PvP. In that scenario, every PKer that comes and kills them is just a griefer. Like, it's just some annoying asshole who's just ruining their fun and wasting their time. The PvPer isn't actually in the wrong. They're playing the game mode as to them it's intended, but to the PvMer who just wants the kit, they're being griefed, because both people in this scenario are correct based on the design that has been put before them. A really good example of the opposite of a thing that doesn't have this problem is Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter is a PvP only activity. There are cosmetic rewards that a PvMer might want, like the Helm of Nature's Not reskin, for example. It looks cool, but no non-PvPer is ever going to go there, is ever going to even think about going there, because the only thing to do there is PvP. All right? It's about setting expectations. In Bounty Hunter, the expectations are clearly set, whereas in the Wilderness, they're just not. You have a piece of content that requires no PvP to participate in, but allows other PvPers to interrupt you. So, to try and bring it all back together, the reason I bring up this story, if you're ever going to try and do any sort of PvP updates, and you want to try and stop the endless arguments that the current Wilderness causes, you must understand this framing as it exists, because this is, I understand this might come, I might be wrong in some places, but I do genuinely believe that this is fairly objective. This is the natural endpoint of both the game design that we have currently laid out and human psychology. All right, game design is the science of feelings. That's just how it is. You know, everything we put in the game is about making good feels, you know, and generally avoiding bad feels. Why do fireworks go off when you get a level up? Because it feels good, okay? And it feels good to kill people, yeah? And sometimes it feels good to kick sandcastles down. That's fine, all right? I'm not taking that away from anyone. But if you're having a discussion with PvP and you do not understand this concept, you're never going to get anywhere. Because you're both talking different languages. You're just talking past each other. The Timmies and Johnnies of the world are not on the same wavelength, you know, because they're talking about completely different things. Remember, Timmy just wants to build a sandcastle. He doesn't want to fight in the boxing ring, but the manager has put the only sandpit in the park in a boxing ring. So how can you blame him for playing in that sandpit and not wanting to box if we don't want to put sandpits anywhere else? It's not the situation that it comes, and the complaints and the arguments between the Timmies and the Johnnies. It's neither of their fault. The only person you can blame is the manager for putting a sandpit in the middle of a boxing ring. Like, that's a bit silly, don't you think? So I think I've explained the point well enough. Let's see how this comes together. Like I said, just to say one more time, because I know this one will never get through no matter how many times I say it. I am not trying to say that one side is wrong and one side is right. It's not about who's right or wrong in this. I am just trying to explain the feelings of it. Okay? Okay. That's all I've got. So I'll see you later. Peace.